Today's scripture lesson is from 1 Samuel chapter 18, verses 1 through 4, and chapter 20, verses 30 through 33. When David had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was bound to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Saul took David that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that he was wearing and gave it to David, and his armor, and even his sword, and his bow, and his belt. Then Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan. He said to him, "You son of a perverse, rebellious woman, do I not know that you have chosen the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of your mother's nakedness? For as long as the son of Jesse lives upon the earth, neither you nor your kingdom shall be established. Now send and bring him to me, for he shall surely die." Then Jonathan answered his father Saul, "Why should he be put to death? What has he done?" But Saul threw his spear at him to strike him. So Jonathan knew that his father desired to put David to death. Here ends the reading.
Dear friends, it's windy here, so you will hear a little bit of wind in the microphone. On this Pride Sunday, I want to sing a song of love between Jonathan and David. Our reading from the 1 Samuel are unequivocal. First, we hear about their intimate relationship. The soul of Jonathan was bound to the soul of David. Then we hear about Jonathan giving David gifts, particularly gifts of clothing and armor. And if there were any doubts about the nature of their loving relationship, we have that homophobic outburst from Jonathan's father, the jealous Saul. By the way, it contains probably the most vulgar and abusive verse of the entire Bible. And what was in the official translation does not cut it here. If you want to hear more after the service, I can give you that. But isn't this, unfortunately, a common experience all around us? Gentle and loving relationship being confirmed by attacks and homophobic tirades. But friends, that is not the last biblical word about this unique loving relationship. The last word belongs to David, who mourns the death of his lover. When David heard that Jonathan fell in battle, he sang this deeply moving song. Now, quoting just 3 telling verses from the first chapter of the 2 Samuel. "Oh, how the heroes have fallen in the midst of the battle. Jonathan lies slain gored down on the hilltops. I grieve for you, my brother Jonathan. You were my dearest. Your love for me was wonderful, surpassing the love of women. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Vessels of war are shattered. That is a beautiful and moving piece of poetry. It is a shockingly surprising biblical description of love between two men. A love that surpasses the love of women. And I immediately hear objections from traditionalists and fundamentalists and homophobes of all different stripes. And what about David and all those women in his life? Well, haven't those people ever heard about people who are attracted to both genders? Nowadays, we call them bisexual. But there is something more. There is also a stronger biblical argument to be made here. I mentioned it briefly in my Friday message. David was not originally a personal name. It was form of a royal title, translated as beloved or chosen by God. My Edinburgh teacher considered it a royal title designating the royal prince, a successor to the throne. Biblical David could be a composite person, a collection of several royal princes that would explain the wild variety of stories about David, the extreme, often contradictory diversity in his character and his behaviors. Sometimes predatory and masculine, sometimes soft and feminine. For instance, David playing an instrument in the royal court that was, in the ancient Near East, a role for attractive, often semi-naked young women. So here you have it. I hope you'll remember that whenever you hear about David playing his harp. Isn't it interesting? And have you heard about it before? But if you go into an ancient times and ancient iconography and so on, if you have encored music players, those are bands of women playing flutes and harps and tambourines and castanets. Here you have David. So behind one name, especially if it was originally a royal title, there are multiple people and characters, along with a diversity of beloved lovers. Furthermore, as I have mentioned, David, whether as a title or nickname or a name, is derived from the word for love. It can be translated as beloved or darling, sweetheart, loved one, or lover. And biblical David, as a royal prince named darling, certainly did not disappoint in love. Biblical David was indeed a larger-than-life lover and sweetheart, if you pay attention to the Bible and its stories about him. Here I must also mention cross-cultural and cross-religious influences and parallels. The relationship between Jonathan and David mirrors closely that of Achilles and Patroclus, a similar couple from classical Greece. The relationship between Achilles and Patroclus is an integral part of the Iliad and compulsory reading through the Hellenistic times. Homer himself might leave the audience guessing about the exact nature of their close relationship, but classical Greek literature is quite clear about their intimate, loving relationship, including Plato. Achilles, among the Greeks, just like Jonathan in the Bible, was Erastes, a mature man in full strength who acts as lover, mentor, and protector. While Patroclus among the Greeks and young David in the Bible assumed the role of Eromenos, a young man, a mentee, and a protege, the one cared for and protected, educated. Here we have the Hebrew Bible closely paralleling classical Greek literature and erotic culture. So, if you hear fundamentalists spewing bigotry and homophobic abuses, quoting some well-known biblical passages out of context and without understanding, applying them to our modern milieu from the ancient times, here you have a different perspective, a beautiful biblical Hebrew Bible alternative. Tradition which embraces classical Greek influences while celebrating the same gender-loving relationship of one of the Bible's pivotal characters. David, regardless whether it was a personal name or a title, was clearly beloved of God. And that divine personified love was quite obviously large enough to embrace Greek inspirations and same-gender loving relationships. Because for God, to repeat what I did last Sunday, for God, love is love, is love, is love.